Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host, Simon Conboy. This is another episode of my 2017 to 2016 franchise and draft review series. This episode will be focusing on the Detroit Lions. So for this series, what I'm doing is I'm taking each decade, the last decade, figuring out the team's overall record, noting any head coaching changes that have taken place in that time, and then breaking down each draft for the last decade to see if there's any kind of correlation between the team's overall success and drafting. In the weekly review at the end of the week on Friday, I'm going to put all of these together into a table. We'll see whether there is any direct correlation between draft success and overall record. I think it'll be very interesting to see how those results turn out. Really hope you guys check out that episode. I think it's going to be really good. And I think this series, I hope it's as informative and enjoyable as it has been researching for myself. So the Lions in the last 10 years have had 3 head coaches. Could have thought more considering the lack of success at times. So Rod Marinelli for 2007 to 8, then from 09 to 12, Jim Schwartz, and at the minute they have Jim Caldwell. They've managed to amass 63 wins and 97 losses in that time frame. Of course, things have been looking up lately. The 0-16 2017 2007 season, of course, that had a massive impact on those numbers. They were very poor. As I say, things are starting to look up for them. They've had 3 playoff appearances in that time span, so not enormously successful. Several poor seasons, a few middling ones. The 0-16, of course, being the truly outstanding record amongst them. So for the drafts, what I'm doing is I'm taking the first 3 rounds, evaluating each pick, giving them either solid, which will be a +1 to their overall score if it's a player that's achieved what you would hope for a player in that spot. 0 if they've just been okay to mediocre, perfectly reasonable pick, and -1 if that player is a bust. Players from rounds 4 through 7, especially in doing this exercise, I've realised how few of them actually have any impact on the team they're drafted to. So any of those that have had such an impact will be mentioned as value players and will give the team a score of +1, and I'll discuss those players individually as well. So going to 2007, the second overall pick and first rounder was an absolute home run. The wonderful Calvin Johnson, aka Megatron, 3-time All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler, set all kinds of records in his career. What a player. Of course, it's a slam dunk home run pick. Absolutely fantastic. 3 second rounders that year. Quarterback Drew Stanton, he's been a bust. Reasonable backup, could maybe move him to a mediocre, but I'm going with bust. Ikasha Alana Francis, the defensive end, he was a bust. And Gerald Alexander, the defensive back, I don't even remember him, he was also a bust. This draft would, if it wasn't for Megatron being in contention, again in the Friday episode, I'm going to do my 10 favourite and least favourite draft classes. This one would have been a contender had Megatron not been involved. Out of respect to Megatron, this one will not be in that list, but I feel it deserves special mention. The 08 draft following that, however, may well be. In the first round, we've got Gosda Sherrilus, the offensive tackle. Really could have put it as a bust. I've gone for mediocre out of the kindness of my heart because he had some okay seasons, but I really feel that should probably be a bust. In fact, I'm making it a bust now. So that's a bust. In the second, Jordan Dyson, the linebacker, he did nothing. That's a bust. In the third, Kevin Smith, the running back, he did nothing. He was a bust. Andre Fluellen, the defensive tackle, not a particularly good player. I'm putting that as a bust. You'd want more out of a third rounder, I think. And just to salvage it so they got something from it. In the third, Cliff Averill, of course, a fantastic pick. Most of his damage has been done with the Seahawks. We had some really good seasons in Detroit as well. So this one definitely in contention for the worst. It's a lot of high picks. Most of them doing absolutely nothing. The 09 draft. So we got Matthew Stafford with the first overall pick. I think this was coming off the 0-16 season actually, so I was wrong earlier when I said that was 2008 they went 0-16. My apologies. He's been solid, really continued to improve as his career's gone on. Of course, expectations high of a first overall pick, but considering the franchise has been terrible for a large period of his time here, I'd say he's been a solid pick for them. Brandon Pettigrew, the tight end, 20. I think he was a bust. You expect more from a first rounder. In the second, Louis Delmas, the safety. I thought he was a really good player. Unfortunately, injuries cut his career short. I've got to give it a solid. I think they got good value out of him for a second rounder. He was a good player. In the third, DeAndre Levy, recently released, but he had a pretty good career with them as well. That has to go as a solid pick. And in the third, Derek Williams. I don't even remember him being in the league. That has to go down as a bust. So that's a more reasonable draft, particularly in comparison to those I previously mentioned. In 2010, Ndamukong Suh with the second overall pick. 3 All-Pros, 5 Pro Bowls, been one of the best defensive tackles in the league. That's a home run pick, even being picked as high as he was. Javid Best, unfortunate there with injuries. As a 30th pick in the draft, I believe. It's got to go down as a bust, unfortunately. Third round, Amari Spivey did absolutely nothing. That's got to go as a bust. In the 7th, Willie Young, defensive end. He provided good value, was a perfectly reasonable player, especially for a 7th rounder. That goes down as a value pick. In 2011, another one of the potential worst. The Lions being good at getting on that list. Nick Fairley at 13, mediocre, up and down kind of career. If it was a second or third, it would go down as solid. For someone picked that highly, it's got to go down as mediocre. In the second, Titus Young, the wide receiver, definite bust. Also in the second, Mikel LaShaw, the running back, also a bust. That's not a great job there, Lions. In the 2012 draft, Riley Reef at 23 at the offensive tackle. Mediocre, could probably edge towards bust there, but I'm going to be generous with this one. Ryan Broyles, the wide receiver in round 2, he was a bust. Bill Bentley, defensive back in round 3, that's another bust. In the 5th, Tahir Whitehead, pretty solid linebacker. That goes down as a value pick. The 2013 draft. This was a really, really good draft actually. This might make the best list. In the first, Ezekiel Ansah, the 5th overall pick. Good player. Didn't play quite as well last year, but I think he'll recapture his form from 2 years ago and continue to be a good player. So that gets a solid. In the second, Darius Slay, the corner, had a fantastic season last year. He's been good for a couple of years. People have finally started to catch on to how good he is. Definite solid pick. And in the third, Larry Warford, the guard. He's gone to join the Saints now, but he was a good player for them. That's another solid pick. That's a really good job nailing all 3 of those picks. That's the kind of draft that really helps your team, no doubt. In the 2014 draft, we've got Eric Ebron, the tight end at 10. Has to go as a bust. Has not lived up to that draft position. Again, this is one of those, if it was lower down, it might be a solid or mediocre, but for the 10th overall pick, not good enough at this point in time. In the second, Carl Van Noy, he's been mediocre, just not upgrading that one. And the third, Travis Swanson, the centre, I think that's a solid pick. The 2015 draft. Now, bear in mind, for the last 2 or 3 drafts, I'm a bit more generous with play. Of course, it's hard to evaluate some of them. They haven't necessarily played enough. Might not be enough tape on them, so a lot of them will not have any impact on the team's score. So Laken Tomlinson, the guard at 28, mediocre at this point, could go either way, to be honest. Amir Abdullah, similar, several injuries, has played quite well when he's been in, not giving him a grade at this point. Alex Carter, defensive back, he's done absolutely nothing. There are spots there. If he was good enough, I feel he would have played by now, so I'm going to put that one down as a bust. And last year, Taylor Decker, the offensive tackle, not enough there. Played okay as a rookie. Could easily end up being a solid, but I'm not willing to commit to that at this point. Sean Robinson, defensive tackle, and Graham Glasgow. I don't even know who that is, but we'll find out. The draft last year. So in total, the Lions, as you may expect, one of the lower grading teams. Some of those early drafts were absolutely terrible and got very little productivity out of them. So we've got 16 busts in total, 7 solid players, 2 home runs, 1 really good pick, only 2 value picks, which I think is one of the lowest totals that we've managed to come out with, for a grand total of -4. -4. That's incredible. I mean, to only come out of these drafts with about 12 players, considering especially where they've been picking in a lot of them, is just shocking. With the first rounders, they've had 12 first rounders. They've had 4 that have worked out, 3 have been absolute busts, and 5 that have been either mediocre or haven't been able to decide on yet because they're recent picks. That's not good enough. Clearly, the Lions have been poor at drafting in every stage in the draft. That score it's picked up a bit in the last few years. As I say, one of the best draft classes a few years ago with Answer and Slay. But generally, there's a large amount of those drafts that ended up providing 0 contributors to this team. Explains why they've provided one of the worst records over the last decade, as say things have picked up. But the Matt Millen era was an absolute disaster, and they were suffering for how poor the drafting was during that time frame for a long period of time. So yeah, interesting stuff, Detroit. Explains quite a lot, I think, that score. So what do you guys think? Any comments on the ranking system? Am I being too harsh on the Lions? Too generous even? What do you guys think? Are there any particular examples I've given that you disagree with? Let me know, whether it's via the Facebook group, the comments below, or on Twitter. I'll do my best to get back to absolutely everyone. What do you think of the series so far? Always appreciate feedback. I think it's a really interesting series. I've had a lot of fun researching it. I hope it's been as enjoyable to watch. If you enjoyed it, check out some more of my videos. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. It's been an absolute pleasure, and as always, go Bucks.